Hello guys, welcome. This video is a reaction video to Michael Blackson on Acorn saying Africans don't think about slavery like Black Americans do. Now, before we even start, I know this is very true. I would agree with whatever Acorn said. Africans do not think about slavery just in the same way as Americans do. Slavery is more of a thing that affected people in America, but Americans have a very limited perspective on other countries, on the histories of other countries and the workings of other countries. Americans see the world as an extension of America. So when they see black people from other countries, it really confuses them that, well, why are they not, their ancestors aren't slaves, why are they not outraged, why are they not doing this, why are they not doing that? Why are they not listening to hip-hop music? What are they doing this? Because mainly they don't really see other countries as other countries. They see other countries as extensions of America. So let's get into the video. Here we go.
Well, I had Akon on my show a bunch of times. Me and him go way back. And one of the things that he said that got people a little bit riled up was that he said in Africa, people don't really think about slavery, whereas in America, they do. How was slavery really looked at out there?
Well, in Senegal, we've kind of overcome the thought of slavery. We don't even think about it. The only time we think about it, honestly, is when we're doing tours at Goda Island. You know, outside of that, people have lived and moved and way beyond the slavery concept and idea and mind state.
And a lot of people got really upset. And this has always been sort of like the African, Black American kind of conflict that in 2023 is still around. But what is your take when you hear statements like that?
Yes, man, I 100%, agree to some of that. And I think what happened back in a lot of countries in Africa were all colonized by different countries, okay? Ghana, Nigeria, most of those English-speaking countries were colonized by England.
Yeah.
You know,
Senegal was France.
Yada yada.
Yada yada.
All right, so when they colonized those countries, you know, I guess when slavery was set up over, they try to like cover it up. To me, in my opinion, you know, I've been going home and doing a lot of research. Mind you, you know, I'm from there. I was born in Africa. I was born in West Africa, where they came and they took my people.
Okay, so it seems like Michael Blackson is a bit disagreeing with what Akon is saying, but I'm not really understanding the angle at which he is coming from, I mean, because people were taken from Africa. People were not brought to Africa. It's not really the most it's not really the most craziest thing to understand that Africans don't really view slavery in the sense that Americans do. Because Africans weren't the ones who are the descendants of slaves. The slaves were taken from Africa to America. So the slavery was happening in America. It might have been happening in Africa, but a lot of African slavery was happening with the Arabs. A lot of African slavery was happening with even the other Africans. So it's not really the black and white thing, ironically the black and white thing of saying white people slave owners, black people slaves. It's not really the way people think of it in Africa. Slavery is a bad thing, very bad, but it's not really a big part of African history. It's more of a big part in American history, in recent history as such. Not really like the whole of history. Obviously, it's a really big part of all of history, but it's not a big part of the in the same time span as the Americans.
People and made them slaves and through the, you know, that whole process.
Yeah.
But I didn't know much about slavery till I came to America. So why they didn't teach me this in the 3rd grade and 4th grade?
In Africa.
Why was it being covered up? Why are they trying to make things like, and that's the big problem.
I feel like it's thinking of it as if sometimes the education system has bad intentions of not teaching about it. But sometimes you are taught what you need to know. This is mainly American history. It's not mainly African history. We're not going to teach you things that really don't have an impact on today's workings. For example, I'm from Zimbabwe. in Zimbabwe, in our history, there isn't even any history of a slave trade happening in my country. It isn't even part of the history. But at the same time, even if it were, there are more important issues that happened even in the recent history that affects us today, that we're not going to be focusing more on slavery that happened 400 years ago. We do have a history from 400 years ago of things happening, bad things happening, good things happening, and we do learn about it. But the slavery part is not really that impactful to the history of where you are. So you can learn American history if you want, you can study it, you can learn how it happened. But you can't really blame the education system for something so specific not being part of the history.
Think that's what's happening. You think that Africans actually are trying to cover up slavery
Well,
themselves?
no, I think they were brainwashed by their
Okay.
colonizers. And that's why, because I'm not sure how much, I have a school now. I know we didn't get to that yet, but I built a school, and I was trying to get an idea.
Notice as well when it's a good thing, it's us. When it's a bad thing, it's they. So when he is talking about the good things about Africa, when he's talking about like I grew up there, I was born there, I'm African. He's wearing an African chain there, but he comes back and says they were brainwashed. But how do you, if you are brainwashed, how do you know you're brainwashed? If they're brainwashed, it's not their fault then. If you're brainwashed, it's not your fault. I see you as brainwashed. You see me as brainwashed. I feel like slavery in the recent years has been a big topic in the US. Most not because they really care about the slaves in the past. Not that the white people or whatever party of who we're from cares about the slaves or cares about the descendants of slaves, but they're using it as a tool to get votes from black people. So it is an issue that has been forgotten for so long, that wasn't affecting the world for so long, but then suddenly it's determining whether you are getting a job today. It's because slavery happened. Suddenly that's the case. So I feel like he's really here and there on main topic.
Yeah, like how much African history has been taught in these schools. How much these kids know about themselves.
Yeah.
I want my kids to know about themselves, know about everything that's happened to your people from beginning to the end.
As I said, one telltale of telling an African from an African American is I used to think Michael Blackson was like bred, but because of the jokes he makes about Africa, because of the African accent he uses on his shows and in his comedy skits and stuff like that, I thought he was African. But I'm now realizing this guy has a lot of American in him, because you can always tell difference between an African and American, because the Africans always differentiate between countries. Americans always speak of Africa as if Africa has the same history. They always speak of Africa as if Africa is the same country, like holistically, your African history. There are a lot of African countries where slaves weren't even taken during the slave trade. There are a lot of African countries where there aren't even black people to begin with. For example, countries like Egypt, countries where people aren't the traditional black people. There's a reason why black people in America have a certain build, have a certain appearance, a certain skin tone. It's because they were taken from a specific region in Africa. It's not because they're just African, it's because they were taken from a specific region in Africa. So you can't say African history, they have to be told about their history. It's not African history. It's the history of specific countries in a specific time, and it's the history of America. The histories overlap. It's not necessarily the history of everyone in Africa, and it's not necessarily that everyone should learn that history in that sense.
I mean, I can tell you one thing, right? And this is from an outsider's point of view. Like I was an immigrant. I came over to America when I was about 5, and I lived in America my whole life. But in 2000, I went to Africa for the first time. I went to Senegal. And the one thing I realized when walking around Senegal was that there was a sense, as you meet the people and you correspond with the people who live there, you have this this overbearing sense of the people there know who they are, they know where they came from, they're comfortable. You know what I mean? They could trace their families back hundreds of years. there isn't a level of uncomfortability that I think Black Americans have because of the history of slavery in this country was, I think, different than the slavery that was happening in Africa. You know, I mean, it was just at a much greater and I think more brutal level. So you have this sort of uneasiness that happens in America that when you go over there, you're like, oh, I'm the outsider here. You know, the white guy is the foreigner. The white guy is the guy who's just here visiting. Everyone else feels comfortable with who they are. And it was a very interesting feeling. And it made me realize how distinctly racist America is, which you never really think about it because I've always been in America, right?
I feel like America is one of those great examples of someone who thinks they know everything, but actually are very comfortable in their ignorance. Now, this is not a hit on any Americans or anything like that, but this is to say Americans feel like, in terms of racism, a lot of the time, the way they try to stop racism is by using racism itself. In Africa, it's not really the most. Sometimes it's in cases like SA, but SA I feel like it's like an extension of the US in Africa, like a version of the US in Africa, where race is very important in a lot of things. But in most African countries, people don't really care what race you are. Black people are the majority in the country. So racism is not going to be that big when people don't really care what race you are. As long as you can do what you're doing, no one cares. The Americans become racist a lot of the time to minorities because minorities are easy to be stereotyped, and a lot of the time in a negative sense. Minorities, especially in the US, black people, there is a very specific stereotype about black people. Even before we start talking about stereotypical looks, not anything like that, but stereotypes in behavior. These are propagated a lot by black people themselves. By black people saying things like, doing things like judging other black people for certain decisions, for certain dressings, for certain preferences, judging black people, outcries on situations like black people marrying white women, people finding that weird, black people voting Republican, people saying you black person wouldn't do that, black people who chose not to vote for Obama, for example, people saying, no, if you're not black, you're not doing that. But Joe Biden saying that if you don't vote for me, you're not really black. There's a stereotype of what black people should be in the US, and I feel like that really even propagates racism more, because when someone who's never met a black person in the US sees a black person for the first time, they're going to have that image in their head. They're going to have this guy, firstly, he has to be a Democrat. They're going to have, he has to like hip hop. They're going to have, he has to like basketball. Because that's all they've seen their whole lives. That I feel like that is propagating racism even more than the actual racists themselves in the US. Is a lot of the minorities creating a negative image of themselves by associating skin color with culture. Americans have a culture, sure, but they think because they are the only black people they see, they don't really look at black people from other countries. They think that black people, the things they are doing is because they are black, not the other way around. Not that they are doing these things in spite of being black, or they're doing these things and are black. They are doing these things because they're black. So they feel like black people, they have an image that is, they have an image of their behavior that is tied to their skin color.
So it was, I think it's something that until you go over there, you don't really understand. I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying?
100% agree, especially for the black Americans. I think every black American, if you could afford $1,000 round trip ticket, go home, pick a country.
Any country.
Pick any country. I mean, go to the West. Let's go to the West, where most of the slaves came from.
Okay, now this is another thing he gets wrong. How can you say go home, then say pick a country, any country you want? How is that home? I am from Zimbabwe. That is my home. The Americans don't look at Africa as different countries. They look at, it's like me saying pick a home, America, Canada, or England, France. They're just the same thing. Just go, it's the same thing. Then say to a white person, to a British American, or to the Italian American, and say, just pick your home in Europe, any of them, just go and see what it's like. It's the same thing. It's like me saying, go to Britain to an Italian. It's not the same thing. We are different people. We have different languages. We have different histories. We have different behaviors. We have different cultures. We have different foods. These are all different. The countries are there for a reason because they are different people. Some of them you can argue maybe they have a tied history, but their histories branch out at some point and they are different they're different because of that. So I cannot agree 100% with someone from Zambia, even though our ancestors are probably the same people. We are still different. That he's Zambian. I can't even understand what they're saying some of the time. I can understand what they're saying some of the time, but I can understand what they're saying all of the time. The languages are different. Even within countries, they are different people. In my country, there are Shona people, there are Ndebele people. We have different cultures, we have different histories. We are Zimbabweans, but we have different histories. So you can't just say, just pick a country and go to that country, and that will be all.
Go to West, you are welcome. I'm not sure where blacks got the idea that Africans don't like them. It was a very good point. It was a point in life, even to now, where some blacks feel like they don't like us. They think that Africans are better than them or whatever. I know when I first came to America as a kid, it was a little bad experience for me because American kids could be very harsh at times. I mean, they clown me. I had an accent. I was darker than most.
Yeah, American kids will be harsher to you than African kids will be harsher to. As an African, American kids will be harsher to you. I can imagine that they would be harsher to you as an African than African kids would be harsh to an African American. They might find you unusual, strange, but they won't clown you for it. They will look at you differently sometimes, but they won't clown you for it. And also one thing, they expect you. Americans are really tied to their behavior. When they come to a new place, they are going to want to determine the behaviors of that place based on where they came from. So they are going to come there and they are going to act like you're the weird one for not acting like the people from which I came, from not acting like the people of the place I came from. Now, this is very deep in itself. Like they will come, an African American in Africa will still act like an African American. While an African in America sometimes will try to acclimatize to the area, to the behaviors, the ways the people act, mostly because of pressure and because of bullying and stuff like that. They would try to at least blend in with the other people. Whilst Americans, a lot of the time, won't try to.
Most of them. And all the and it's sad for because all the black kids knew was Africa was just a bush, everybody working around naked because that's what they saw.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Also, this is a really big part for in politics. I think it's a trope that needs to be destroyed. Americans do not have any picture of Africa that is the modern day. That the modern day Africa is not very far from. There are regions which are far from the modern world, the third world regions. That the whole thing is basically third world, but there are regions which are extremely poor. There are regions with extremely poor people. But that's not every region. There are billionaires in Africa. There are millionaires in Africa. There are very good low density areas in Africa. There are good buildings. There are banks. There is everything that is in the US. Maybe not as big, but it's there. It's not people running around naked. People being sick from basic diseases like the flu and dying. It's not. They have a vision of Africa that is from where they learn about Africa, which is from the days where slavery began, where slavery was happening. So they are seeing Africa from the lens of this, back to the slavery thing. They are seeing Africa as the place where slaves were taken, hence that place still has to be the same as it was when the slaves were taken. We are the ones who came to the America and were modernized, but the people from the place you take slaves are still the same people. They still are uneducated. They still don't. So I feel like black people propagate racism a lot towards themselves in the US due to their they're, I would say, I think that they propagated
They were, you know, it's
through
they didn't.
their ignorance of the African continent itself. Because I feel like even the white people, when they hear situations like that, when they hear stories about Africa, when they see videos about Africa, this is where like the sort of like propaganda version of it comes into play. When they see videos of only poor regions in Africa, they don't see videos of of modern places in Africa. They only see the bad part. This even propagates racism even more. I've seen videos of white people saying Africa, if black people are really on par with white people in terms of intelligence, why is Africa so still a jungle? Why are still people living in the jungle in Africa? Then we get confused as to who's living in the jungle. I have never seen anyone living in the jungle in Africa, and I've lived in Africa my whole life. But I still, every time I see videos on Africa, there are people in Africa who are suffering. In African countries, we're told there are people in that country, in this region. In America, they are told Africa is a jungle.
You know, but like now, like that's why I say if you're grown now, take a trip back home. You know, we love Black Americans. You know, and the governments up there are giving them lands for a minimum price. Like everybody's welcome to come back. You
Yeah. Ghana had that big thing recently, right?
Yeah, Ghana's still having it. Ghana has lands for like
homecoming thing.
if
Yeah.
you're American, if you're black gold, it's a land for like $1,500. You know, they have a land for you near Cape Coast, which is like Cape Coast is in fact where that old castle was, where slavery were taken from. Come and grab this land back. You know, this is where you belong. This is your land. So yeah, man, blacks are welcome. You know, we love them. You know, and let it go and learn the history of what happened. Mind you, you know, these people were captured. These slaves, they came with guns. We didn't have guns. We couldn't fight.
Yeah.
You know, they overpowered us with guns.
Right.
You know,
And they also bribed some of the leaders
local
to
chiefs
sell
and
off their
everything.
enemies and stuff.
I feel like it was less more about the guns and more about the leaders themselves. It's not that they just came and started shooting everyone and taking everyone. It's more like they came and they convinced some of the higher ups that this was in their best interest to take these people. And the corrupt people allowed these people to take slaves in exchange of favors and goods from these people who were coming. And a lot of the time, it wasn't even direct slave trade. Slave trade wasn't even direct in that the white people just came and just started taking people and shooting people and saying, if you don't come with me, I'm going to shoot you. It wasn't direct in that sense. Some of the time, it was even through the Arabs. The Arabs would come and take people in Africa they would take people in Africa and they would sell them to the Americans due to some of the traditions in the Arabic region at that time, in the Middle East at that time.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
you know, so it was nothing.
Everyone had their hands in this dirty business, honestly. You know what I'm saying? No one was really clean when it came to the slave trade, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to blame too much on the poor people that trying to make a living, whatever, which was completely wrong.
Right, but I'm saying
know.
when you're selling off your enemies to the colonizers to be shipped around the world, you got to take a little bit of credit.
But I mean,
you got to take a little bit of blame for that as well.
Yes, but the way this,
I feel like this is another issue is they feel like it's bad to blame the people who sold the slaves to the Americans for the slave trade. They were still terrible people. They did terrible things, and they deserve just as much blame as the people who were getting the slaves themselves. Especially because they were taking people. They weren't even doing it based on color. They were doing it based on not even knowing that. But at least the Americans were racist and just thought the black people were inferior. These people knew these people weren't inferior. They knew these people were just normal people, and they were taking them from their families and selling them to the US. These people were just bad people, just as much as the Americans. No one's worse, no one's good, no one's bad in here. No one's good, no one's better. They are all bad people. And we need to acknowledge that all these people are bad people.
slaves were treated even before they left. I mean, if you get a chance, go to the slave castle, do the tour.
Well, I went in Senegal. I went to the place where it was like the slave distribution center. You know,
Okay.
you know what I'm talking about?
The
The
castle?
cannons. Yeah.
Is it right by the water?
Right by the water. There's that huge, like, kind of like a shark tooth kind of.
Yeah, I haven't been to one in
monument.
Senegal, but I've been to the both.
No, it was
Ghana.
sad, man. I started to cry there. It was sad. It was a sad place to think
Yeah,
that this was
go learn your
human-
history, you know. And
humans were treated like that. Yeah, it was fucked up.
yeah, but you know, I love my Black Americans. I mean, without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. They embraced me from the first day they saw me, and I'm who I am because of Black America.
Okay, so in conclusion to this video, I feel like Blackson is right in some parts. I feel like he's wrong in some parts, but I feel like Black Americans as a whole, I think we need to find ways for Americans to really get past the slavery thing, because they really emphasize that. I feel like not to forget what happened, but to find ways to fix what was done, what happened, and not to keep blaming the same thing forever. Because if we keep thinking of the problem without thinking of the solution, we are not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be 3050, and black people are still going to be complaining, just because my ancestors were slaves, that's why I'm poor today, without finding the solution to why are they actually poor today. So thank you for watching. This is the end of the video. See you next time.